I think thermography is phenomenal for showcasing these stuck energies. We're getting a thermography camera for in here that we're going to literally look at the imaging of our guys and our players before we work on them, after we work on them, because it'll show where your energy systems are blocked or where you're holding different things.
Hey, this is Ari. Welcome back to the Energy Blueprint podcast. With me in this episode is Dr. Sean Drake. A good friend of mine recently connected me with Dr. Drake after he spent 3 days at his clinic in Arizona, and he came back just raving about the work that Dr. Drake had done on him and how good his body felt afterwards. And he basically just said, Ari, you got to connect with him. You got to have this guy on your podcast. He's doing incredible stuff. And so we did, and we had a conversation about the work that Dr. Drake is doing in his clinic. This is someone who has a great deal of experience in movement and recovery care. He works with a lot of high-level professional athletes and basically helps their body and mind function at its best. He does a lot of work physically with his hands on them. He uses a lot of different really cool, novel, cutting edge technologies. And as you'll hear, he'll talk about some of his methods and his approach to clinical care. So a little bit about him, his official bio. He's an accomplished sports health professional specializing in movement and recovery care. He has a master's in sports health science with a specialization in sports injury management and human performance, as well as a doctorate in chiropractic from Life University in Atlanta. He's a former VP of On Base U and Racket Fit, and he developed protocols for rotational athletes with Titleist Performance Institute. His diverse clientele spans everyday athletes, executives, and professionals from major organizations, including the MLB, Major League Baseball, NFL, NBA, PGA, and Olympians. Beyond his clinical work, Dr. Drake teaches breath work and nervous system training. He's served as a team doctor for Nitro Circus and Dew Tour, consulted for various teams, and held faculty positions at multiple universities. Currently, he works with Biohack Yourself as a peer-reviewed author and serves as CEO of Modern Athlete in Scottsdale, Arizona. That's the clinic I was referring to, where he helps clients optimize performance and achieve their potential. He's also an adventurer at heart. His personal interests include triathlons, high altitude climbing, surfing, skydiving, sailing, and running. So enjoy this conversation with Dr. Sean Drake. Dr. Drake, welcome to the show.
Ari, it's a pleasure to be here. I've heard so many amazing things in your podcast. I've already listened to, multiple times. So honored to be here with you today. Thank you.
Yeah, well, the feeling is mutual, and in that one of my good friends, our mutual friends, Mark Asaraf, was raving to me about you, and he said I played tennis with him last week, and he said you gotta connect with Dr. Drake. He's just amazing. He's got magic hands. It's unbelievable what he did for me in his clinic in 3 days, and he was just so he insisted that we needed to connect, and obviously I've heard lots of wonderful things about you, so I'm excited to dig into that with you. So why don't you tell the listeners a little bit about you, your background, and how you got into doing the work you're now doing?
Yeah, so a little bit about me is I grew up as a military kid. I had a dad who was special forces and a mom who was supply. And, I had this dichotomy of, my mom being very logistical, focused, everything had to be to the T, I's dotted. And my dad, who was this very like, the world is chaos. How do you build resilience around it? So I have adaptation over here and I have resilience over here. And, after moving 13 times, before I was out of high school and, going to Florida State, and then we'll talk a little bit about that as we go, I had to learn how to become a different person in each base, but at the same point, learning different parts about me. And so, it's really helped me into where I'm at now in the chiropractic realm. But beyond even that is the high performance and teaching people how to manage their nervous system for resilience, but also to be able to adapt under stress and be calm at the same time so that they can be hyper focused, go after what they want, and release kind of what doesn't serve them so they can literally be the best at whatever they're going to do and know that life is limitless and that anything's possible.
Beautiful. That was succinct. So, what is exactly the work that you do now? Can you describe kind of what it
Yeah.
is that you do and who you
So
work with?
absolutely. So my practice has evolved. Like I never thought I'd be back in practice. Before 2020, I was at Titleist Performance Institute in Oceanside with Dr. Greg Rose, and we started On Base U, which is a baseball company based on education. I'm teaching coaches, players, and fitness professionals how to break out the baseball athlete and make them the most efficient. And then same with Racket Fit, which is the tennis side, which is how I met Mark.
Mhm.
And then 2020 happened, and all of a sudden the world shuts down, and you go from traveling 40 weeks a year, traveling, consulting, teaching, to now having time. And, I ended up having an opportunity to come to Scottsdale to learn how to skydive. And while I was here, during COVID, I would go back to San Diego. We do online training for On Base U, Racket Fit, TPI. And then I'd come back here and I'd jump out of airplanes. And then when I'd land, I'd get on the internet. And at that time, we'd gone through USA softball. And so we were going through their data, getting them ready for Tokyo. And then all the players found out that I was living in Phoenix and they were like, hey, can you see us? And, I was like, no, I'm actually really happy. I don't want to get back into practice. And that's when Dr. Rose kind of just like pulled me aside. And he's like, look, man, I love you. You've got a gift. You need to go back into practice. And so ultimately I opened up my practice in 2020. We had one table that I had from chiropractic college. I had a corneal laser, and I had a baseball bat, a pitching mound, and a base. And that's how we started our company. And all of a sudden, it was this prohibition clinic where at that time, a lot of the guys technically weren't allowed to see people outside of these facilities. And so the word got out like, hey, there's this guy in town that really understands pitching and hitting in baseball. And next thing I knew, I had this like slew of athletes, and it was kind of interesting because I had all of a sudden big league guys or guys that were on like the big league, spring training that made it. Then that year they split up between the big leagues and the minor leagues. So all the big league guys told the minor league guys, hey, you got to go see this guy. And within 6 months, we outgrew our space and then bought a second table, then a hyperbaric, then a PMF. And it's evolved now 4 years later into what I kind of consider a soul center. And it's not just about pain. It's not just about an injury. It's how are you efficient in your movement and your physical side? How efficient are you within managing your stress, your momentum, and who you are? And then where are you at psychologically? And through those three things, a lot of our guys and our players have now found themselves in better positions for, opportunities to move into if you're in single A to double A or double A to triple A to big leagues. Our NFL guys staying healthier longer throughout the whole season. My CEOs that fly in for 3 to 5 days, more productivity. Their wives call me and they're like, what did you do to my husband? Or my, vice versa. What did you do to my wife? And it's really getting people to understand that.
Hopefully, not in an angry way, right?
No,
What'd
no,
you do
not
to
in
my
negative.
wife?
Yeah. No, no, yeah, for sure. They're always like, holy crap, there's something different about them. They have light, they're energetic, they're excited.
Mhm.
And I think that's, now that we have our new center open and we're constantly evolving, right? If I find technologies that work or I find better ways to manipulate the nervous system to make you better, I'm constantly doing that.
What do you think are some of the biggest areas of blocks or limitations or obstacles that get in the way of athletes performing at the highest level? And I don't know if you want to speak to not. I know you specialize in athletes, but just people in general.
I think number one is the misconception of that they're injured. So often, people get stuck to a diagnosis or, hey, that I have shoulder pain or I've got back pain or I've got neck pain. And in reality, I tell people all the time, I'm like, I don't go to the source of your pain. I look at your entire body. So let's take a pitcher, for example. There's a million ways to pitch, but there's one efficient way for that pitcher to pitch based on what they can physically do, mentally do, and like from a soul level do. And a lot of times, if they've got a shoulder problem, a lot of guys go straight to the shoulder. And on base U, one of our biggest philosophies is that. So I break the athlete down from the feet all the way up to the head. I look at, where they're at from a nervous system standpoint, from an HRV, SpO2, looking at their oxygen saturation. And then I also look at kind of where they are mentally and physically. Like, who are they? Where are they at? What are they stressed about? And if they got injured in the shoulder, let's go back to that injury and talk about it. and because a lot of times I'm dealing with one athlete right now in the big leagues, that we've been in off season. Now we're moving into spring training, and he's moving phenomenal. Shoulder plane's gone, but his velo's not up yet, and we're building him back.
His what's not up?
Velocity
Okay.
or the velo, and that's a big thing a lot of guys
Geez,
chase.
if I didn't know what that was, I guarantee 99% of listeners didn't do. Maybe
Correct.
maybe baseball players knew that, but
Yeah. So speed, right? How fast
I
you
was
flip the
think I was
ball.
thinking the abbreviation VLO in my head as
Oh,
you say. I thought it was like some specific metric that you were measuring.
yeah. So, I mean, the thing is a lot of guys, they'll get injured. And there's that emotional connection as well. And they're scared to let loose again because they're afraid that they're going to, re-injure. And we've got to take them into that environment and get them to go back through that and then reorganize it so that they don't have that fear. Now that's also making sure they have the ability to do it. Once they have the ability, now we take that mental physical block out and we turn them back into monsters.
Beautiful. So what what are some of the unique modalities that you're using in your clinic that maybe are different from how other um, let's see, you're a chiropractor by training. I'm trying to think of the right word to call you
Yeah.
here, but you're obviously specializing in performance optimization with athletes. What would you call yourself here? And like what are some of the, I guess the main question I'm trying to ask you is what are some of the unique modalities and methods that you're using compared to other people who are working in a similar field?
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of times, a lot of people have these modalities. Like, you can buy any PMF unit, you can buy a hyperbaric chamber, you can buy a cold plunge, you can buy a sauna, but it's do you know how to use it with the person that's in front of you? And so often I see people, they get all the tools, but they don't know how to use them in the right order, or they don't know, when to use them or like what they're using them for. So for me, when I look at our modalities in our clinic, number one is, pulse electromagnetic field therapy, high Gauss. And the reason that I love PMF is that I can literally manipulate your nervous system to either bring you down or ramp you up. I can get deep into the body from a cellular level because I think that we heal on the cellular level, and we'll talk more on that within the breath work, mindfulness, and things that we do in here. But while they're on there, I'm literally having them go through their visualization of their pitching, their hitting, their company, what they want to see, because now their body is getting energy while they're doing that. And we're creating this epigenetic environment from, if you want to like quote Bruce Lipton, is that now we're actually getting their body to feel that. And then what we do is say, okay, we've got energy in the body, we've got them into homeostasis, or we've got them ready. Then we'll take them and actually work on their body. What's the physical limitation going on? Is it a joint problem? Is it a tissue problem? Is it a brain issue? Is there a motor control? Is it just the fact that their brain just forgot how to use it? And so I'll use techniques such as shockwave, class 4 laser like the Regen Pod. And the reason that I really love these two types of tools, like, yeah, I needle, I do graph, instrument assisted soft tissue, but from a cellular structure, using technology, and yeah, it's more expensive, but you get a better result quicker. After that, then I'm like, okay, well, we need to ingrain the new movement to that range of motion that we gave you. So we'll put them into certain movement patterns depending on what they need. And then I'll put them onto a nervous system reset tool, like a shift wave, or a Roxiva, which is a light that actually stimulates the brain. And so we can actually get into a trauma release or get them into gratitude, get them into joy. We'll put them into a sound chair, which is called a solo dome, which I love because I think sound frequency is the next part of where we're going as a society. Like, and we'll talk more about that. And then once they've done that, we'll either do some type of vibrational therapy to get them to actually like set everything in, get lymphatic drainage, and then they'll go. Other things that we'll use in here is hyperbaric. I use OxyHealth in here in our basic 1 ATA, 1.5 ATA. I use Flowpresso for lymphatic, and then we use EQ Pulse, which is a pulse PMF device that we can use on the body to open up tissue, open up energy areas, and actually help the body heal quicker. So when you look at our system that I'm creating for the modern athlete, it's not just saying I'm treating an issue. You're really working the whole nervous system the entire time. And when you can actually get that athlete or that, that patient, and by the way, everybody's an athlete. If you have a body, you're an athlete. Bill Bowerman said it. I believe it. And so often we forget how we were when we were kids. We forget how to play. We get so stuck in this world of go, go, go. I got to work, work, work. And what we do in here is we get you back into playing and getting you into feel. And so it's pretty amazing and fun.
What would you say? is, I've heard you make reference to the nervous system a number of
Mhm.
times here. How would you conceptualize what the nervous system is and sort of what it's doing? So why are you putting such an emphasis on the nervous system in the work that you're doing?
Because I think at the end of the day, that's your motherboard. And if you look at like a piano, so often we get used to playing certain emotions, but whether it's anger or frustration, or maybe it's like, ecstatic joy, but we forget about the little ones in between. And if we can get that athlete or that patient to slow down, now we have access to new opportunities and new emotions and new areas to be able to do the work. If you're completely ramped up and you get treated, a lot of times that's considered more trauma to the body. So the body goes into guarding more. And on the other side is if you're too low and you do it, now all of a sudden it's like, whoa, I don't want this. So you really, when I'm looking at my patients, I'm always asking them when they come in, number one, I'm a genie. How do I get to help you? You get three wishes. And so I always like to know that. And it stumps a lot of people because usually they're coming in for some type of issue, but then they're like, well, what do I really want? And at the end of the day, that's my goal for you. It's like, okay, what do you really want right now in your life? And that could be, I want to throw 100 miles an hour. That could be, I want to have enough energy to take my company to the next level. That could be, I just want to play with my kids. I don't want to have brain fog. I want to wake up in the morning. I want to work out. I want to sleep well. So once I have those things together, now I can say, okay, where do I start you? Like I had a client come in yesterday, a big CEO client, and he came into me for he wanted more flexibility. And he's like, I need to be more flexible. I need to golf better. And when I got down to it, I realized, dude, this guy's been through a crap load of trauma over the last 2 years. He's so wound up. I'm like, I'm going to call an audible. I'm like, we're not even going to work on your body today. All we're going to do is like literally take you through breath work. We're going to put you into a couple different modalities. And once we did that, he's like, holy he's like, I can move. I'm like, yeah, because tightness isn't always what we think is like a physical problem. It's the fact that you're so wound up, you forgot what it's like to be calm. You forgot what it's like to be in this like state of just like bliss.
Yeah, fascinating. So you mentioned PEMF,
Mhm.
and it's you mentioned a number of other technologies, the Roxiva, the shift wave chair. Um, when you're dealing with a client or a patient like the one that you just described, who's so wound up, who's got a lot of stress, anxiety, a lot of tension in their nervous system, what are some of the technologies that you found to be most impressive in helping people break free of that?
I think number one, without like I say this all the time, I'm like, we are the modality. Like I truly believe that. Like all these are cool and it's great to have external things, but we are the modality. So the first thing I do is I teach breath work to all of my patients. And I think that if you can get anything in life, breath work's number one. Because if you can literally use breath work to calm yourself. You can use breath work to excite yourself. You can use breath work to take you into a full-on journey. You can take breath work to like literally break through trauma. You can take breath work to break into performance. One of my pro pitchers, Tarek Skubal, he just won the Cy Young last year with the Tigers, Triple Crown as well. And him and I always talk breath work. And what I find amazing is like a lot of these guys, they'll get their heart rate up to like 145, 155, or even higher when they're on the mound. And then we teach them breath work. And when they get back into the dugout, they get into it and they drop their heart rate back down to like 55, 60. And so you're through your breath, you can pretty much control all of it. Now, all these extra tools are great because now you get to like enhance or manipulate that breath, that power that you already have inside you.
Hmm. Are there specific breathwork techniques that you are using, and do they come out of any particular school of thought around breathwork, or is it more tools that, sort of pieces that you've picked up from many different teachers, many different schools of thought within breathwork?
I have become like a psycho studying breath work over the last 5 years. And, I've trained with a lot of amazing people who have taught me a lot. Everything from conscious connected breathing to Kundalini to, holotropic to Wim Hof, all these different types. But what I've found is not all breath work is great for everybody in that moment. And so some simple ones that I really love is like 6 seconds in the nose, 6 seconds out the nose, really just focusing in on that calm setting. That's your like meditation piece, in the nose, out the mouth is really where you're going to get that quantum field performance side. You're going to get the hypoxia. You're going to be able to push yourself a little longer. You're not going to go into major hyperventilation. And then for my guys, when I need to take them, into a really intense situation, I'll go in the mouth, out the mouth as fast as we can, as long as we can, and we'll use breath holds. And within those, just those minimal three things, we can get a lot of work done.
Hmm.
And then from there, it's also, looking at, Eastern medicine, talking about chakras. Like I used to not believe in a lot of this stuff. And as I've started to really study it, I can't unsee it. And so it's like, we have energy systems throughout our entire body. And if we're blocked in a certain area and we can't open that energy space up, well, we can't transfer force. We can't improve. We're going to be blocked at a certain limitation, and maybe that's why you're not healing. So, yeah.
How do you, given something like that is, by most of the scientific community is considered pretty woo-woo and unscientific. How do you try to bring a sort of a thread of science to it? Do you have tools that are intended to measure those types of things, or and what are the modalities that you would use to try to work on something like that?
So my dream, like, obviously, like I'm still building this brand and this company, but if, I think thermography is phenomenal for showcasing these stuck energies. We're getting a thermography camera for in here that we're going to literally look at the imaging of our guys and our players before we work on them, after we work on them, because it'll show where your energy systems are blocked or where you're holding different things.
So you
And
think the physical tissue temperature of different areas of the body is a proxy for the
I
energy?
do. I really do. Because when you start to look at just thermogenesis of the body, like the body's going to send more things to areas that are disruptive. And if it's not in a clear, concise, or formulated, system, you're going to have areas that are going to get more than others. Now, I would expect, like, let's take a pitcher, for instance. If I, thermography them before they pitched and afterwards, we're going to have a higher area, of concentration, probably in the shoulder, elbow, probably the landing leg, and because of the forces that are coming through it. Now, if we can balance that out quicker, they're going to recover faster. Same thing with like if I've got one of my like high endurance athletes and they've been out on a 100 mile, bike ride, there's going to be certain areas that are going to be more apt to have taken that force during that training, and we can hyper focus in on that to move that through. Then yeah, I think that's one of the best ways to do it. Um, I think there's a lot of different, modalities out there right now, like EMG, looking at muscle stimulation, looking at actually how everything's firing. And then, if I had my dream, looking at DEXA scans is one of the top ways to look at the human physiology of how healthy you really are. How's your bone density? Where's your visceral fat? How's your overall fat? Like, where's your muscle tissue? And once you have that, you can really, like, instead of guessing over a 30, 60, 90 day, period, you can showcase, okay, yeah, you are improving. Your bone density is improving. And that's where some of these microcurrent vibrational devices are so important, like Juvent. I'm going to be buying one here soon because, high vibration can actually cause some disruption in the system. But what's cool about Juvent is that it uses microcurrent. You barely even feel it, but it stimulates the bone to create a stronger response. And when you have stronger bones, you're going to have better blood flow. You're going to have better bone marrow. You're going to have better opportunity for the immune system. So these are just different things like in the dream world as we start to continue to build for objective data that I'm going to want to have for our players and our patients that come in, for our 3 day or 5 day programs.
I just was looking up Juvent as you mentioned that. So it's saying that it's a micro impact platform. How does this differ from a typical vibration platform?
So again, I'm new into this technology, but I was so blown away by it. Um, it's so think of it like this: when you get high vibration, and I actually didn't believe it until I got on this thing for 30 minutes, 5 days. I was sore because what it's doing is it's using microcurrent to stimulate instead of the high vibrational. So it's allowing the bone to actually take less force, but actually improve strength. And again, I'm a novice at this part of it. I'm just telling you what I experienced and why I'm going to bring it into my own practice. Um, I'll tell you more once I get it with clinical data over the next, 30, 60, 90 days. I start to use it with my guys. And I'm buying one for my mom because when you look at osteoporosis and you look at, the aging population, it doesn't cause a lot of like harm on the patient, or there's no chance to get injured. It's an opportunity to have low force over a period of time that can basically increase strength and stability. And if you have those two things, you have a less chance of a fall rate. If you have a less chance of fall rate, you have an increased mortality rate.
What are yeah, are you you meant since you mentioned kind of subtle energy and chakras and that sort of thing, are you a fan of some of the traditional sort of approaches from the East as far as moving these energies,
Like
qigong,
Reiki,
some of the or Reiki, or some of the more original conceptions of like hatha yoga and things like that?
yeah, I love Qigong. I mean, absolutely. Like, I grew up with, like I told you, a dad in special forces, right? But he was also huge into martial arts and Tai Chi. And like, I get goosebumps even talking about it. I miss my dad so much. And like, he was such a master he always said to me, and actually, I said this to one of my pitchers today, he's kind of got on my nerves. And I'm like, dude, slow down. Like, you've got to slow down to speed up. And with Qigong, it's a practice. And same with Tai Chi and like Wing Chun that I use. Like these are arts that have been around for millions and millions of years. I don't care. I don't like, I might get in trouble for saying this, but I'm gonna say it. I don't always like evidence-based because it takes 5 to 6 years to get research done. I like things that work. If you can show me something and it works and there's not a ton of science behind it, but it's working, I'm probably going to use it. And when you look at the history of a lot of these Eastern arts, they work. There's a reason why they have less cancer rates. There's a reason why they can sit in a squat and most Americans can't. There's a reason why they have, less disease. And so when I look at that and I look at, yogis and um it I love the fact that these people have an art, that they have a lifestyle. Like I think if you pick something and you really go into it from a lifestyle standpoint, I think you're going to get a bigger opportunity for longevity in life and you're going to have a happier life because you're consistent. I think consistency is a big part of all those practices. If you talk to the top masters in any of them, it's a daily practice. Like if you just drink water every day instead of pop, if you were able to eat whole foods every day, you know what I mean? But we don't. And so I think a lot of that comes down to lifestyle as well.
I'm curious. This is a broader question, but just sort of listening to how you approach improving the health and performance of your athletes and the people you work with. What I haven't heard you say is something along the lines of maybe how a traditional, like how certainly how a conventional doctor would approach those, assessing the health of someone, and even how most functional medicine doctors approach the health of someone, which generally revolves around blood testing and get and functional medicine much more comprehensive blood testing plus maybe other types of testing, microbiome testing, different hormone panels, saliva testing, urinary testing of various kinds, food intolerance testing, et cetera, et cetera. I'm curious, and by the way, when I ask this question, I'm not in any way implying that that is the superior or the best way of doing things. I'd like you to just maybe speak to that, and I don't know if you do use those types of tests in your practice as well, but what do you see as the role of that, and how would you contrast your approach with sort of the typical type of testing based approaches in both conventional and functional medicine?
So I think in conventional medicine, I think a lot of times it's looking at like one symptom or one problem. They're looking for what they consider a norm. And, if we look at the history of norms, we've changed the numbers to fit an area of propaganda or where we want to move. And to
Explain that,
me, so like let's say
but
blood
also
pressure.
keep your train of thought. So
Yeah, no, no, I got you. Let's look at blood pressure. Like they've changed the numbers every single, 10 years. to make it a little bit like lower or higher, to maybe say, well, you need this drug or you need this situation to like manage that. On the other hand, it's like just because you do blood tests on one day doesn't mean that that's your blood test every day. Like I'm very pro at least looking at data. I'm not an expert in blood work, so I can't talk as an expert in functional medicine or an expert in looking at blood panels or saliva or gut testing. Are there certain players that I send out to friends of mine who I think are very good at looking at that stuff to say, hey, are we missing something maybe? Or if like my athletes have traveled out of the country and they've maybe caught some type of like pyloric situation or some bacteria, like looking at that, yeah, then maybe we look at that. For me, my job is to say, okay, I'm looking at your nervous system and how you move and how you function. If you're not getting better, then yeah, now we got to look at your diet. Now we got to look at some other situations. But I collaborate with some people that I also don't always just say this is the only thing. We're looking at it as a whole and as a team. So I think sometimes in functional medicine world or looking at some of these other areas, we get so caught up on supplementation or we get so caught up on, external, sources. When in reality, if we could balance the internal energy, the internal mindset, the internal efficiency, I think you could actually limit a lot of that stuff. I don't think that, we always need extra, extra, extra. We're not always limited. Well, why are you limited? Like, let's talk about that first. How's your lifestyle? What are you doing? Are you doing the basics? If you're not doing that and you're trying to correct it with this, I don't know if you're going to be the best you ever could be.
It sounds to me like your methodology is moving away from pathology, a pathology centric approach. So, you mentioned earlier if somebody comes in and they're complaining of shoulder pain or back pain or elbow pain or whatever, you don't necessarily immediately go to that area. You're trying to look at the broader person. It sounds to me like you're moving in the direction away from a hyper focus on a particular symptom or condition or problem towards sort of how can we improve the overall functioning of this person?
Correct.
Is that accurate, and how would you speak to that?
So I would say this, like, let's say you come to me with an elbow problem and you just fell on the ice or you slipped and, fell. Yeah, I'm going to look at your elbow first. That's an acute injury. And then I'm gonna be like, okay, cool. This is an acute injury. We probably need to go to imaging to make sure that something's not broken, torn, etc. If you're coming to me with a chronic pain, there's probably something else that caused that issue, an inefficiency in the system in your body that's holding on to that, which is why you're in pain. I had one of my players come in from spring training. He didn't do his off season with us, but he's out here for spring training recently. He's having a flexor issue, and he's a left-handed hitter. And his agent calls me and he's like, hey, I'm going to send this guy in. I need you to check his flexor. And I'm like, just so you know, I'm not going to look at his elbow until the very end. And he's like, that's why I'm sending him to you. Figure out why this elbow issue is happening. Well, once we got through him, well, number one, he's a lefty. His right ankle wasn't moving, so he couldn't get into the ground force. He had no internal rotation on the front side, and he couldn't rotate through his thorax. So what's he going to do? He's going to fall off. He's going to bring his elbow in, and all he has is that elbow to do the work. He has no ability to transfer from the ground to the upper body.
In other words, for people listening, the basic idea is that deficiencies or deficits of movement, mobility, or strength in other areas of the body now cause excessive amounts of stress on this problem area. So
Correct.
the problem from this frame isn't necessarily localized to the area where pain is, but is actually originating in other parts of the body.
100%. And I've seen him 6 times over the last 3 weeks. And he took 200 swings yesterday, zero pain.
Wow.
And he's like, dude, you've only like done PMF on my elbow and like, but you've worked everything else. He's like, I'm sleeping better. He's like, I'm happy. He's like, I'm waking up without the alarm clock. He's like, I show up into the training room and I'm stoked. When in fact earlier he was in such a mindset of like, crap, am I going to make it this season? Like I have fear, I'm scared. And I said, dude, just trust me. If you will give me 3 weeks with you, if you still have this flexor issue or there's still major pain, let's get imaging because you've had this for a while. But now we've got his body moving, we've got him functioning. And now that force isn't going through there. His bat plane's better, And so, yeah, is the tissue probably still healing? Absolutely. But the rest of the body is now performing. So that's not my ultimate goal. Like, yeah, do I vote? I will always focus on your quote symptom area because I think that you got to always listen to the patient. You got to build rapport, and you got to make sure that you're hearing what they're saying. But in my very first initial with them, I say, look, don't think of this necessarily as a chiropractic clinic. Look at this as an efficiency center. You're a car. The coach that's coaching you is your driver. I'm your pit crew, and I'm going to find the best damn pit crew to take care of you. If I can't do something, I'm going to find somebody that can help you. But I will do my damnedest to make sure that you have the best of everything so that way you have everything in life. Like I tell my players all the time, I'm like, I love you and I love that you're an athlete and I love that you want to make the pros. But what I care about is your wife, your kids, that when you get out of the game, that you have longevity, that you can show them and your kids watch you so that the next generation doesn't have to deal with what they've had to deal with. Like my Trojan horse is my athletes to their kids. Like I adjust a ton of kids and a lot of pregnant wives in here. But it's because I believe that if I can get to the kid, we can change the world.
That's beautiful. So, what kinds of things do you do with your body, with your hands, in how you work with people? Are you doing a lot of manipulation with people? Are you doing a lot of soft tissue work?
Yeah.
How does that figure into the work that you do?
That's a great question. It's all the above. If I find like, I think if there could be one certification that every medical practitioner should take that is a physical medicine practitioner, whether it's a chiro, acu, PT, is the selective functional movement assessment by FMS. And the reason I say that is it's one of the things, Dr. Rose and Gray Cook absolutely blew my mind when I figured out that it's not always about an adjustment or it's not always about the soft tissue. It's, is it really soft tissue that you need to work on? Is it really joint? Or is it a motor control problem where, they don't have the range, but then you actually check and they have the range, and now you just got to train the brain back. And that evolved me into so many other things like stecco and fascial manipulation. I think as a practitioner, fascia is the number one thing I look at now.
Mm,
And if you look at tensegrity, like your fascia wraps everything in the body. And now I'm looking into organ manipulation, because we're asymmetrical inside. And so a lot of players, especially like if you're a one-sided swing, well, you've probably got fascial manipulation in here. Well, if you can't get a full breath hold, your diaphragm can't work, your intestines can't work because you've got a restriction somewhere. Well, now your body's working harder while you're trying to perform. So when I'm working on a player, I check them every time I work on them. I don't have a cookie cutter approach where I'm like, oh, I'm suggesting this, this, and this. I literally go ground up every time I touch my players. And I'm like, and I have some players that they hold really well, and I'm like, you don't need anything today. And they're like, thanks, doc, I trust you. They're out. Or I have some players, I'm like, look, you're gonna be in here for probably an hour and a half. Is that cool? Yeah, no problem. And we'll do extra things, whether it's needling, soft tissue, fascial manipulation, it's not one size fits all. It's and the thing is that just like the blood work, your body changes every day. So I have to check you every day. I have to have some type of assessment to show me where we're going in each visit.
yeah, it's certainly the case for me, and I I'm definitely an athlete, a lifelong athlete, but I'm still, now in my 40s, I'm still surfing and weight training and playing tennis and rock climbing and sometimes beating up my body a little too much. So it's definitely the case for me that things vary quite a bit from day to day.
Well, I can't wait to get you out here for 3 days with me. And I'm so jealous. I mean, one of the things I miss most about living in San Diego, like and working at TPI and on base U, is that, I would go teach at a conference, I'd fly back, and I had a girl to help keep my house clean, and she'd pack a bag for warm, cold, and in between. So I never knew where I was going the next week. And I would land, I had a sailboat down in Mission Bay. I would stay on my sailboat for like the night. Then I would take my car, my Jeep, I'd drive up to my condo up in Oceanside, I'd surf, and then I'd fly back out. And it was like, the ocean is my serenity, right? And I'm in a desert now. And
Yeah.
it's like, I'm a dried out fish, and it's, so I'm jealous that you get to surf a lot.
Well, hopefully you can take some surf trips every now and then.
Oh, we will.
Yeah. So tell listeners a bit about your personal story
Mhm.
and kind of what inspires you and why you're doing this work.
So, my dream was to be an astronaut. Like growing up with a dad in special forces and a mom in the Air Force as well, I thought I was going to the military. That was it. And then 9/11 happened. I was supposed to go to the academy in the Air Force Academy and broke my ankle. Prep school filled up. I didn't apply to any other colleges. I somehow called the coach at Florida State and I was like, hey, is there a way that I can get into Florida State? And they're like, well, you're a student body president. There's this program, called Emerging Leaders. We'll get you into that. So I got into Florida State and, I had this interesting career. I got in a really bad car accident my freshman year, fell asleep going about 95 miles an hour, went right into the back of a gas tanker,
Jeez.
survived that.
Wow.
Um, Ended up developing ulcerative colitis from all the stress. And so the next 2 years while I was trying to walk on to Florida State's track team, I was dealing with UC, taking Azicol, prednisone. Then I got depressed, got on Zoloft, Xanax. And then my junior year, right when I was walking on the team, I got hit by a semi truck on the same interstate driving home. My grandfather had cancer. And so I was driving home that day.
My God.
My car flipped 3 times, hit a tree. And that's when my life kind of like turned upside down. And I didn't have the opportunity to commission. I didn't have the opportunity to finish out my track, and I got really depressed. I was on a ton of oxycodone. Like I had a script for 50 pills a month. Like it was crazy, right? Like if you look at it nowadays, like writing that big of a script. And so, chewing oxycodones, taking Zoloft, Xanax. I don't know how I got through my senior year. I really don't remember much of it. And then got out of Florida State, and then I went to work into politics. I started work for the Republican Party of Florida. Got into lobbying. I loved politics, and so did really well there. Ended up working the Charlie Crist inauguration, Jeff got camp, and I realized that's not what I wanted. So I moved to Tampa. I was going to go to law school at Stetson. That was my goal. And then I met a chiropractor that absolutely changed my life. And, I went to him and I'm like, look, man, I can't do this anymore. They want to take half my colon out. I researched, like, I went to a chiropractor. All he did was put stem on me. All he did was like, put hot packs, kind of adjusted me. He didn't even help me. He ends up adjusting me. 2 times I had basically frozen shoulder. Within 3 adjustments, I had full range. Within 3.5 weeks, I had a stool for the first time in a year and a half that wasn't blood and mucus. And I hadn't taken any oxycodones. I went cold turkey off all my medications. I don't recommend that to everybody. But I went cold turkey and I went to him and I'm like, I think I want to be a chiropractor. And he's like, well, if you want to be a chiropractor, you got to do a few things. Number one, you need to go see, go like shadow 5 chiros, 5 PTs, see how if you can get 5 MDs and a couple of nurse practitioners, and tell me what you think after that. So I spent the next 3 weeks. I'd work. I'd go find a doc that would let me come shadow. And I'll never forget, I'm with Dr. Burns in Tampa. He's a well-known guy, worked with a ton of athletes. And you had the Big Show came in like from WWE. And so like as a kid, like I loved wrestling, right? Emmitt Smith came in that day. And then this like pregnant woman came in, and then a baby came in. And I'm like, how do you go from that to that? You know what I mean? So like I was just kind of blown away. And he explained to me the science behind the body healing itself and what actually happened to me through working with this other doc. And I was like, all right, I'm going to chiropractic school. And while I was in chiropractic college, I got involved in a lot of different things. And I've always been fascinated through engineering. Like that was my passion, right? Like I'm still an engineer by like mindset and brain. I'm always looking at how to make things better, efficient, the physics side of it. And so I did a master's in sport injury management and human performance. And while I was in there, I started to research space again because and I'm claiming this. I'm going to space. I'll be the first like medical practitioner in performance for space. That's my dream. To take all these ideas into space to keep us healthy long term. But I found a paper on PMF and bone density in astronauts during my research, looking at like ACL injuries and how we can improve them. And that's when I found PMF. And I was like, okay, there's a whole new side to this modality world. And so I started researching energy and I started looking at red light. I started looking at like hyperbaric. I started looking at all these different things. And then I ended up moving out to LA and then San Francisco and started the Sports Performance Institute. And while I was in San Francisco is when Dave Asprey started launching Bulletproof. Well, I got involved with Vasper, which is a blood flow restriction and cryotherapy training device, which I freaking love because, and I'll talk about that another day. But I got involved with them for the concussion side because I was working with rugby, and they had a lot of research on vets and PTSD and brain injury from IEDs and things. So I went down to Palo Alto and I met with Sebastian and his dad, and I said, "Hey, explain to me this technology." Well, I ended up getting on their scientific advisory board, and then I ended up going to one of my pro skaters, Beaver Fleming, who's on Nitro Circus, became like a little brother. He tore his ACL on tour, and he's like freaking out. I'm like, "I got you." So we ended up taking up the Bulletproof, and that's when I really started to see how energy works in different modalities. And then I started, jumping on the bandwagon of like, okay, what else is possible? And that's when I took the job with Titleist. And, Dave Phillips, who's the co-founder, is a huge fan of technology. And so him and I just geeked out on like finding the best tools for our athletes to improve them. And then COVID hit, and here we are. So, and, I've made a lot of really amazing, connections and mentorships. And, I speak on a lot of the, circuits. And so I get to meet new people and new technologies and new ideas and new philosophies. And sometimes I see something, I'm like, oh, I was wrong. That's better. So then I take that on. And then it's like, oh, well, that's actually really cool. That'll actually enhance and make it more efficient. Let's take that on. So I'm going to be a lifelong learner on how we optimize the body. And I always want my patients to know that I'm never going to stop. If I find something that's going to work better, and even if it's more expensive for me, I'm going to give you the better result. And that's our ultimate goal here.
Last two questions I have for you. One is what related to what you were just speaking about, but I'm curious, what are some of the most impressive technologies that you've found currently and that you're using in your clinic and that give the biggest like wow experience to people? People get on these, use these technologies, and they feel immediately different. They feel wowed by the experience.
So one that I just included in the practice in the last month is Solo Dome, and it's a sound chair device. And what's cool about this, I met these guys at Rafi Lounge in Malibu, and I was there with the fires and with Shiftwave, and I'll talk about that in a second. But I met these guys, and they built this chair, and these guys are geniuses, Joshua and Chris, and they're like, we want to build furniture with the best sound, to watch movies and play games and do all this stuff. And one day they had one of their friends who has Parkinson's get in their chair, and they'd come up, they took all the healing frequencies that are out there in research. And by the way, I love when people are like, oh, this is woo-woo. I'm like, no, Stanford's done research, Harvard's done research, Oxford's done research on sound therapy. And so one of their guys got into the chair and his tremors went away. And I get goosebumps even thinking about this, how this story got started. And they're like, well, what if we started using this not just for gaming, but for healing? And so they had, there's a pediatrician down in South Florida that is like, hey, I want a chair, I'll try it. And what they're noticing is kids with autism and ADHD and the sound frequencies and the 40 hertz and all these different, other levels of frequency is that these kids are mellowing out. They're becoming verbal. And so I'm like, okay, I sat in it. I was blown away. I got it. And so I have my players now because my thing is how do I bring healing into your daily life? Most of my players, when they get done playing, the way they come down is they get on a video game and they all play till late at night. So what I do is I'll actually put their favorite song on that they're getting ready to walk out to, and I'll have them visualize. But in the background of the chair, I can now put the healing frequencies through, and they'll get off and they'll be like, "Holy shit, dude! I just sorry, I cussed." They'll be like, "Man, that was amazing! Like, what the flip?" And so, I got three being delivered next week because it's just such. That's how I end all my sessions now with sound frequency healing.
What did you say? You have three more being delivered next week?
I ordered three, yeah, because it's that big of a wow factor of finishing the treatment, and it just puts them into joy, right? And so now if they're playing a game or watching a movie, they can get recovery with it. That's one. Number two, I think cold exposure is a big one. I don't care what plunge you get or what cold, what you can afford. I really think that if you can, like, I have a Morosco in my clinic, and the reason that I have it in my clinic is I can get it down to 32 degrees.
Which
And
which one? Morosco?
Morosco, yeah.
Okay.
And the reason that I love theirs is it can get down to 32.
Ooh, that's
And
too cold for me.
you think that, and so you come spend a couple of days with me.
Yeah.
Um, what it does is that with my players and my high-end CEOs, or even my moms, at that level, you only have one choice is to calm yourself under that stress. And so through that and through intention, it's literally an ability to release and conquer. And so you already have power when you get out of it. And so I think cold exposure is a big one for me. The Roxiva has been a game changer on just mentality and overall just efficiency, like in the brain. I've already talked about PMF, but hyperbaric, I think if you can afford it, hyperbaric, everybody should be doing hyperbaric. Oxygen is the number one thing we need for our body, whether it's from a metabolic standpoint to a healing standpoint. It's also one of your coolest ways to just shut off and be in Zen. And like if you're claustrophobic, there's bigger chambers and things like that. But those are some of the big ones that I have in my clinic that I love right now.
Mhm. Have you found the Roxiva really induces a profound state shift?
Oh my gosh, I had a U.S. Olympian in here last week, and I'll just say it. If she gets mad at me, I'm okay with it. She'll be okay with it. But Ali Carter, she's a pitcher for USA softball. And this girl is such a rock star. Like I got to go through her in 2020 before they left for Tokyo. And, she called me and Kelly from UCLA is the head coach of UCLA and she played there. And I've consulted with UCLA and I love those girls. They're just amazing, amazing athletes and just human beings. And you just look at who these women are and, what they go through from a mental standpoint, physical. And she called me about a certain situation. And I said, well, if you come out here, I'm not focusing on that. And she's like, what do you mean? I said, if you're going to commit, you need to give me 3 days, 3 full days with me. And at the end of the 3 days, if you don't think it was worth it, I'll give you your money back. And I said, we'll focus on the main issue that you're concerned about. But if you trust me, I'm going to take you into a different field. And I put her on the Roxiva and like, it was just a whole entire shift of her subconscious of what she thought and where she was and to see her power at the end of the 3 days like I can't wait. We're gonna do an Instagram live about her 3 days here, but it's amazing to me how a white light going as fast as it can with your eyes closed takes you into places that you couldn't even imagine
Mm.
and being able to come out of it and just bliss and joy or in tears because you're finally feeling again. And the cool thing is you didn't have to take anything in your mouth. You didn't have, it wasn't external. It was all internal, but it was just a stimulus to help your eye movement, to help your brain to get to a place that you need to be your best.
Mhm. And did you mention the shift wave device
Yeah.
as well?
I love, I've fallen in love with Shift Wave and, one of the things is, Evan, he's on their DoD side, so military, and he's a current active Green Beret. And when the fires happened, we were the first civilians that got in there. It was, our whole group, and there's four of us at first, and we drove in and we talked our way through the blockades, and we got all the way down to the command center. We were able to help about 500 firefighters rebalance their nervous systems within 10
Wow.
minutes on the shift wave. And my players now, like I'm manipulating the different types of frequency that we're using on the shift wave with the other tools that we have. But I was going through some stuff a couple weeks ago, just mentally, right? And I was doing a cold plunge, shift wave, Roxiva, cold plunge, shift wave, Roxiva, cold plunge, shift wave, Roxiva, because I was using those to help me train and stimulate out of that guttural response of anger, fear, frustration. And it's amazing when you know how to use these tools, how quickly you can enhance your life. And so,
Very cool. Last question I have for you is, a lot of you're obviously a clinician. You work directly with people with your hands on them in your clinic. Um, but for most people listening, obviously they're not necessarily in a position to work directly with you, though I suspect they can. Some people might want to travel out there to see you in your clinic in Scottsdale. Um, But what are some of the key sort of messages or key principles, key ideas that you want to leave listeners with to sort of take away from this conversation?
One thing that popped in my head, I completely didn't even think about sauna. Sauna is a big part of what we do too, just from a holistic approach, cellular detox. I also use the sauna. Like, you've been in a Tesmacol, right? Sweat Lodge.
Hmm.
Okay. Everything we do in here is kind of a ceremony, right? Like when you're in the heat, like if you want to get out, why do you want to get out? So I just wanted to mention that real quick. For the listeners that like it, you are the practitioner. That's what I want to tell the listeners. Like you are your own practitioner, and you've got to find tools that help you. And I think that, basic things that you can start with is getting into some type of like meditation and breath work, getting into sauna, cold plunge, being mindful about, when you do it, why you do it. I think there's so healing is so affordable now, from a technology standpoint. A lot of stuff is expensive, but there's a lot of stuff on the market that's not so expensive that if you just started to use daily, you could really get a benefit. I'm going to be launching my own program and I'm already doing it behind the scenes, where I consult on building performance centers or healing things inside the home. And there's different levels. Like there'll be like a bronze level, a silver level, and a gold level, like depending on what your budget is. I'll be able to advise you on like, hey, this is what I recommend. Here's the protocol and plan. Because I think a lot of times when people buy technologies, they put themselves into Hertz reactions, or they don't know how to use it, so they overuse it or they underuse it. And so being able to be guided by somebody who can say, hey, like here's the basics. Like start with a low Gauss PMF system with, look at, basic red light. Look at just, your home. Like start cutting the crap out. Like, you don't always have to, come out here to heal. Like you can heal within no matter what, where you are. Just start to look at your environment. Start to look at who you're around. If you're around somebody and you're anxious or you got, frustration, like ask yourself, do I need to set a boundary and just not have this person around? There's a lot of things that like I'm personally going through right now where I'm like, No, you're messing with my energetic field. I don't need you in my life."
Dr. Drake, this was a fascinating conversation. I think the work that you do is really, really interesting, and I suspect a lot of listeners will also feel that way and maybe interested in traveling out to Scottsdale to work with you. Do you want to let people know the name of your facility and how they can get in touch with you?
Absolutely. So we've rebranded. It was Athlete Chiropractic when I opened, and then I went to Athlete Empowered because all my players are like, when I explain what you do, it's not just a chiropractor. And then now we've actually like we're completely rebranding to Modern Athlete. And the reason that I went with Modern Athlete and we added an E to the end of modern is for the electricity inside you, managing your nervous system for where you want to go. And it's great. I get to work with my fiance, who's soon to be my wife. Her name's Kiki, and she's a mat, and you've had her work on you, Ari. But she's a
Mhm.
massive healer in her own setting.
That was crazy, by the way. I've never experienced anything like that. When the
Yeah,
device she's using and the currents traveling through her body into yours, it's like pretty mind-blowing.
yeah, and now we've got this new device called EQ, which does that, but with being able to use handheld cups, train with it with Pilates. Our strength side of what we do, we use NewFit to actually enhance the nervous system as well from the strength conditioning. Um, but yeah, I think if you want to reach out to us on Instagram, my Instagram is Dr. Sean Drake. Hers is Kiki Cordero. I think it's like underscore. Modern Athlete. We're launching our new Instagram here soon, but you can follow Athlete Chiropractic for the time being. And yeah, if you want to reach out, you can reach out to our office, 602-810-6664. And I'll just say this, our office isn't for everybody. If you're trying to come out here to just fix a piece or a part, probably not your place. If you want to change your life and you want to have a shift in your soul and you really want to change humanity, that's who we want in this clinic. And so if that's what you want and that's who you want to be and you really want to find out how far and how deep you can go to be your best, then give us a call.
Dr. Drake, thank you so much for coming on the show. Really, really interesting conversation, and thank you for the work that you're doing.
Thank you, sir.